The White Tree is always seen as a symbol of the Kings of Gondor, and yet its origins go way back, even before the first age of Middle-earth. Hey friends, it's Carl here, and in today's video we'll be discussing the lineage of the White Tree, where it came from, its history, and how it became linked to the line of Numenor. When one thinks about the White Tree, the first example that would often come to mind is the dead tree that was present in the courtyard of the fountain, and yet there were several other white trees before this. The very first white tree existed during the Years of the Trees, a time before the first age of Middle-earth. The Years of the Trees started with the creation of the two trees of Valinor, and these were created by two of the Valar, Yavanna and Nienna. One of the trees was golden in color, and it was called Laurelin, while the other was silvery white, and it was called Telperion. These trees emitted their own light, and they were so bright that they lit up all of Valinor. Now the elves that lived in Valinor loved these trees, especially Telperion, the White Tree, and so, during the year 1142 of the Years of the Trees, Yavanna created a second white tree in the image of Telperion. This tree shared its beauty, though unlike its predecessor, it did not emit its own light. It was called Galataleon, and it grew in the city of Tirion on the hill called Tuna. As it grew, Galataleon bore many fruit, and one of its seedlings was brought to Tol Eressëa, a large island located off the coast of Valinor. Now we're never told when exactly it was brought there or how, though we know that the white tree that grew there was called Celeborn. After the defeat of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord of Middle-earth, the Valar rewarded the Edain by raising the island of Numenor. The Edain were part of the race of men and the ancestors of the Numenoreans, and they had contributed to the defeat of Morgoth. Morgoth's defeat represented the end of the first age of Middle-earth, and in the year 32 of the second age, the Edain settled on the island of Numenor, located halfway between Aman and Middle-earth. From time to time, Valinor would send envoys in the form of elves to Numenor, bringing them gifts such as herbs and knowledge. And during the early years of the Second Age, the elves of Tol Eressëa brought to Numenor a seedling of Celeborn, the White Tree. The seedling was planted in the court of the kings, and it was called Nimlot the Fair. It became a symbol of the line of the Kings of Numenor, their friendship with the elves, and a reminder of the blessings that the Valar had bestowed upon them. And as Numenor prospered, Nimlot the Fair grew and flourished. However, as is often with the race of men, pride turned to arrogance, and the Numenoreans became jealous of the elves for their immortality, and angry with the Valar for prohibiting them from traveling to the Undying Lands, where they thought they could escape their inevitable mortality. The Kings of Numenor also stopped caring for Nimlot, the White Tree. The penultimate king, called Tar-Palantir, attempted to heal this rift between Numenor and Valinor, though we're told that his repentance was too late to appease the anger of the Valar. Under his rule, the White Tree was again tended with honor, and he prophesied that when the tree perished, then also the line of kings would come to an end. Unfortunately, this attempt at reconciliation didn't last long, as when Tar-Palantir perished, the new king, Ar-Pharazôn, who was his nephew, reverted back to their hate for the Valar. In the year 2261 of the Second Age, Ar-Pharazôn attacked Sauron in Middle-earth and ordered him to swear fealty to him. Sauron emerged from the Tower of Barad-dûr, and he saw that he had no chance to stop the Numenoreans by force, and he therefore submitted to Ar-Pharazôn's will. Ar-Pharazôn took Sauron back to Numenor as a hostage, and yet, before 3 years had even passed, Sauron rose to become the king's closest advisor. He whispered lies to the king, telling him how Melkor was the true god, while Eru Ilúvatar was merely a phantom, a ruse that the Valar had created to make men serve them. Many Numenoreans then started to worship Morgoth, though some remained loyal to the Valar, and these were called the Faithful, and they were led by Elendil's father, Amandil. As Sauron's influence within Numenor grew, he urged the king to cut down the White Tree of Numenor, though King Ar-Pharazôn was reluctant to do so, as he still remembered Tar-Palantir's prophecy. These whispers reached the Faithful, who knew that eventually Ar-Pharazôn would give in to Sauron's will. And so, one night, Isildur entered the courts of the king in disguise. He stole a fruit from the White Tree, Nimlot. Nimlot was guarded night and day, and the faithful were forbidden from entering the courts of the king. When the guards caught sight of Isildur, he was attacked and wounded, though he managed to escape and get away. The fruit he stole was planted in secret, though it came at a heavy price. For Isildur's wounds were grievous, and he came close to death. Yet when the sapling's first leaf blossomed, we're told that Isildur, who had lain long and come near to death, arose, and was troubled no more by his wounds. After this event, King Ar-Pharazôn relented to Sauron's advice, and the White Tree was cut down and burnt over an altar of fire, and it's said that burning it released a foul smell, and that the land of Numenor was covered by a cloud of smoke for 7 days. Now the faithful were related to the Kings of Numenor, as their lineage could be traced back to Silmerian, who was the daughter and oldest child of the 4th King of Numenor. However, during her time, the laws of Numenor prohibited a woman from becoming queen, and so her younger brother became king. Therefore, realistically, the faithful had a better claim to the kingship of Numenor, which is why I believe the prophecy regarding the line of kings and the White Tree prevailed and didn't end with Ar-Pharazôn. It's also why the sapling that Isildur took from Nimlot seems to be linked with his lifeline. That when its first leaves blossomed, his wounds were healed, and we'll see this link quite often when discussing the other white trees. I like to think that when Nimlot was felled, the sapling that Isildur rescued took up the legacy of Numenor, just like how Ar-Pharazôn abandoned this legacy, and instead it was inherited by the faithful. In the year 2319 of the Second Age, Ar-Pharazôn led a fleet to attack Valinor, and due to this insolent act, Ilúvatar himself intervened. He destroyed Ar-Pharazôn's fleet and buried them under rocks in the caves of the Forgotten. Numenor also sank beneath the seas, killing all of its inhabitants, save for the 9 ships of the faithful led by Elendil, as a mighty gust of wind pushed their ships away from this disaster and towards the shores of Middle-earth. The White Tree sapling was carried on Isildur's ship, and when they reached Middle-earth, they established the northern realm of Arnor and the southern realm of Gondor. In the realm of Gondor, several forts were established, such as Minas Anor and Minas Ithil, and the sapling was planted outside Isildur's house in Minas Ithil. Now Sauron had started to recover his strength in Mordor, and his hate for the Numenoreans had not diminished. If anything, it had grown. In the year 2429 of the Second Age, he laid siege to Minas Ithil and captured it, and once again he ordered for the white tree that stood there to be burnt, ever seeking to destroy its heritage. However, Isildur managed to escape during the siege along with his family, and with him he took a sapling from the tree. We're not given an exact date of when Isildur replanted the sapling. However, we're told that he later plants it in the court of the fountain in Minas Anor in memory of his brother Anarion. Anarion was slain during the events of the Last Alliance in the year 2440 of the Second Age, and Sauron was defeated in the year 2441, which ended the Second Age. Therefore, I feel quite confident in saying that the tree was most likely planted at the start of the Third Age, cause I doubt Isildur would have gone back to Minas Anor before Sauron was defeated. This white tree survived for around 1600 years. However, in the year 1636 of the Third Age, a great plague swept across Gondor and other lands in Middle-earth, and it's believed that Sauron had created it, though this is never explicitly said. This plague decimated the Gondorian population, and it resulted in the death of King Telemnar and his children. Now we're told that when King Telemnar died, the white tree of Minas Anor also withered and died. Now whether this is a coincidence or if the tree perished since King Telemnar and his line ended is debatable, though it does again imply a link between the royal bloodline and the white trees. Anyway, a sapling from this tree was once again salvaged, and King Telemnar's nephew called Tarondor became king. The sapling was replanted in the court of the fountain in the year 1640 of the Third Age. In the year 2050, the last king of Gondor, King Eärnur, left to challenge the Witch King in Minas Morgul, and he was never seen or heard from again. He didn't have any children or nephews and nieces, and though there were other distant blood relatives that could have claimed the throne of Gondor, no new king was elected, as there were fears that it could result in another Gondorian civil war. Instead, the rule of Gondor passed to the Stewarts, who were to rule until the king returns. In the year 2872, during the rule of Belector II, the 21st ruling Stewart, the White Tree of Gondor perished. This coincided with the death of the Stewart, which I find a bit strange considering that it's usually linked with the royal bloodline of Numenor. No fruit or seedlings were obtained from this tree, and despite its death, it was decided to keep the White Tree in the courtyard until the king returns. And it's this very tree that we read about in the books. In the year 2019, after the events of Sauron's defeat and the destruction of the ring, Aragorn discusses his future and that of Gondor with Gandalf and tells him, "But I shall die, for I am a mortal man, and though being what I am, and of the race of the West unmingled, I shall have life far longer than other men, yet that is but a little while. And when those who are now in the wombs of women are born and have grown old, I too shall grow old. And who then shall govern Gondor, and those who look to the city as their queen, if my desire be not granted? The tree in the court of the fountain is still withered and barren. When shall I see a sign that it will ever be otherwise?" Now this might seem like a petty issue, however it had quite a few implications. Firstly, it seems to refer to his union with Arwen, and that if the White Tree remained barren, it's an ill omen for their line. Aragorn had sworn to Elrond that he wouldn't marry Arwen until he was king, and if the White Tree had to bloom again, it could be seen as a sign of his divine right to rule, a renewal of the friendship between the kings of Gondor and Valinor. Gandalf then leads Aragorn to the mountain above and behind Minas Tirith, where they find the sapling of the White Tree, and Gandalf says, "Verily, this is a sapling of the line of Nimlot the Fair, and that was a seedling of Galataleon, and that a fruit of Telperion of many names, eldest of trees. Who shall say how it comes here in the appointed hour? But this is an ancient hollow, and ere the kings failed or the tree withered in the court, a fruit must have been set here, for it is said that, though the fruit of the tree comes seldom to ripeness, yet the life within may then lie sleeping through many long years, and none can foretell the time in which it will awake. Remember this, for if ever a fruit ripens, it should be planted, lest the line die out of the world. Here it has lain hidden on the mountain, even as the race of Elendil lay hidden in the wastes of the north. Yet the line of Nimlot is older far than your line, King Elisar." What's interesting to note here is that the sapling lay dormant for thousands of years, and had just happened to sprout recently. I don't think it's a coincidence that it occurred during Aragorn's lifetime, and this again ties in with its link to the Kings of Numenor. I also see it as a renewal of friendship between the Valar and the Kings of Gondor for two reasons. Firstly, Gandalf seemed to know its location since he took Aragorn there, and he was an emissary of the Valar. And secondly, after Sauron's defeat, the great eagles who were the messengers of Manwë, the king of the Valar, flew to Minas Tirith and proclaimed, "And the tree that was withered shall be renewed, and he shall plant it in the high places, and the city shall be blessed." This shows that the Valar knew about the sapling, and that Aragorn would find it and replant it, and perhaps the blessing that is mentioned is their own. Anyway, following these events, Aragorn ordered that the dead tree should be uprooted and placed in the tombs of the kings as a place of honor, and instead of it, the newfound sapling was planted. Less than a month later, the sapling had grown significantly and had started to bloom. I really like the theme of renewal that surrounds the story of the White Tree. The renewal of the trees, the renewal of the line of kings, and the renewal of the blessing of the Valar. It all comes full circle, which is quite fitting, as all three of these are tied together. Anyway friends, this wraps up the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to hear your opinions regarding the tree, if you think I missed anything out, or if you agree with me regarding its symbolism, so drop a comment below telling me what you think. If you can, leave a like cause it helps this channel immensely, and subscribe to join our fellowship today. I hope to see you all in my next video, where together we can once again explore the wonderful world and lore of Middle-earth.